Well, hey, Crossing students, what up? Yes, it's Jeff. I'm back. But we're going to be doing something a little bit different today, really different over the next maybe a couple of moments here. We're having an interview with one of our local let's say local partners.
Global partners?
Global
Yep.
partners. So, if you're familiar here with the Crossing, it's one of our big values that we have. This is Aaron Molesky, is that
Yep,
correct?
that's right.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
going to mess that up.
No, you're great,
That's
bro.
okay.
Yep.
I got it. So give us a little bit of background as far as who you are,
Yep.
how you're connected to the Crossing, because I know I talked to Trevor.
Yep.
Trevor's the guy. He said you got to have a conversation with them.
Yep.
He knows students, but you.
Yeah. Well, man, it's good to be here, so thanks, man. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. But Aaron Molesky, I have an amazing wife. We've been married 20 years. I have 2 teenage children, so I'm still in youth ministry. You know what I'm saying? And so, I've got a 17-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, so I've got a senior and a freshman. And man, I've been in youth ministry basically my whole life. For years, I was working in a local church, worked with CIY for years. If you guys are familiar with CIY
Yes,
or do
yep.
CIY, yeah.
Yep.
And so I did a lot of the global stuff, but got a chance to direct some of the moves and all of that. So just love students. I love to work with the next generation because they're not just the next, they are the now.
Yeah.
You know that. But so anyways, did that for years, and then God threw us a curveball. We weren't looking to go global, but when you say yes to Jesus, you just got to be ready, And though we'd traveled, been a part of a lot of different things, CIY called us, and they just said, hey, would you lead a group of students to Ireland? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. Well, we got there, and God just started moving, making it very apparent, speaking to us, and he called us to that nation. So we prayed about it for a while, and we sat on it, started talking to some of our mentors and leaders, and they said, yeah, this is Jesus, go. So, man, we landed in Ireland on May of 2019, which is your anniversary date for being here. So, man, we share some of that. That's cool. But so we've been there for a year and a half, and that's it, man. Yeah, we just back here visiting some people and connecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, right now we're actually in a series. It's called People.
Okay.
In our student ministry. And so what we're trying to figure out is, we talked about conflict. We have talked about grace. We're talking about, empathy. Now we're talking about grace next.
Okay.
But what I want to ask you is, when you think of people and maybe people groups,
Okay.
how would you compare what you've seen here in the United States versus what you're living out right now in Ireland? We talked a little briefly beforehand, how you said there's, obviously people are people,
Right.
but there's a specific group of people that you have seen. It's just like, this is crazy as far as how this works.
Yeah.
As far as when it comes to fighting and just not getting along. But go ahead.
Yeah, so no, that's really good. So, I mean, one of the things about Ireland that's been eye-opening to us is that they've actually been plagued with internal violence and animosity for years. I mean, they've had one glimmer that was really good for a couple hundred years. I might share about that later, but really they've had this, and it started religious. This is where it's really sad, man. And so it was like the Catholics and the Protestants, and there was this big fight over land control and all that kind of stuff. And some of this might even start sounding a little bit similar to even American history, because it is very similar. But at the end of the day, there's some big scars in that land, because people have been fighting brother against brother, even like Civil War days, that kind of stuff. It's just like fighting for values that aren't Christian, fighting for values that are honestly just selfishly driven, but they have this religious undertone, like, hey, for I'm about to say this, but for God and country, right? Yes. Or for whatever, but that's the same kind of language that they use, but they're basically terrorist groups. And this was happening in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. 2002, there was a peace agreement. Like, if anybody's U2 fans and have ever heard the song Bloody Sunday, I don't know, whatever it is. That song, but that's all about all of that fighting that's going on there. And so, when you talk about grace and you talk about empathy and you talk about division, like it's huge in that land today. So there's a peace treaty that's been put on there, but like there's still walls that separate sections, like 30-foot walls, neighborhoods, from a Catholic neighborhood to a Protestant neighborhood. And there's still all these undertones of violence, all that kind of stuff. And honestly, talking about youth ministry, one of the greatest things that the youth are doing is they're starting to go, man, none of this makes sense to us.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we, not to use this, but they're on there going, why can't we just find a place to meet and have a conversation about this, and a place where we can find peace? And so here, where it's tough for us, bro, is that like the church, they use religious terms in their stances. So like when they say, well, I'm a Protestant or I'm a Catholic, and that's where all the division is,
Yeah.
it's hard to come in and be like, well, guys, I'm a religious person and I want to walk in and I want to help mediate some of this. You can't do that.
Yes.
And so, you had to find these inroads, of course, driven by Jesus, but to find a place of peace and reconciliation between the groups. And so, and we're starting to see Jesus do that in some really unique ways, mainly one-on-ones and with families. So, yeah.
Well, it's well said, because I think even in our own country, I mean, it's just there's party lines and there's
Yes.
with politics and social issues and all these things that are going on. And we've made a comment, and we've heard even some students say like, well, why can't we be more accepting? Like, what is going on? How do we? We can get along, but what we're seeing here is like almost the exact opposite of what we're trying to pursue.
Yes.
And so for us as a student ministry, it's very difficult sometimes it's very easy for the church to manipulate with church terms.
Yes, right.
And then say it's all Jesus, but then wait a second, if Jesus here, is he there? Because how can it be quote unquote for both?
Yeah.
And it becomes confusing.
Yes.
But that being said, if you look at students that you've seen in Ireland, especially now that you have 2 high school kids,
Yeah,
said?
that's right. Yeah.
But you look at students like here in America that you've seen from CIY days.
Yeah.
What do you think are some differences, and maybe even some similarities as far as here's what we're trying to do to push things forward.
Yeah.
And here's what we do, things that are great over in Ireland that maybe American students do better, or vice versa.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's a lot there, man. I would say this is like even in our home. Right. Here's the problem. We talk, we have these big conversations up here, but I think sometimes, like, if there are students listening that are here, that are listening to this, if we can just make these big issues really applicable, like, to your home life. So it's like we talk to my kids about this all the time. My kid is a different culture. My son is a different culture than my daughter. Right?
Okay.
I mean, different personality. We just say personality, but it's a different culture. He thinks differently. He sees the world a little bit differently. All of those kinds of things. Well, and guess what? Marriage is a lot like that too.
Yes.
I'm very different from my wife, right?
Yes.
So if we can bring it down and even if there's people listening, they're like brothers and sisters, and like going, how do you find peace in your home? And you're like going, well, that's a good question. But if we can start there, even in our home and even with some of our friends when we have issues and go, man, a part of it is I just want to sit and listen, and I'm going to try to hear it from your point of view, which I know is incredibly difficult at times, right? But see, this is what Jesus was so brilliant at.
Yes.
I mean, he was, of course, so wise and all of that, but we are just like Jesus. We have the Holy Spirit, completely human, that kind of a thing. And so, but he was able to walk into all different circumstances, all different. He was able to walk in political elite, and he was and with the poor, and everywhere in between, right? With the prostitutes, with the pimps, everywhere in between, he was able to walk there.
Yep.
But he was able to meet them, listen to their need, and speak into their life. And really, it came out of a place of friendship. So I think one of the things I'm learning, even as I watch my kids grow up, the more that they become friends. And not just trying to find a sense of commonality for the sake of commonality, but when they can actually sit there and go, oh man, our life isn't really that much different from one another. And we actually, at the end of the day, I'm kind of getting out of student world here, but for families that are on the Catholic side and the Protestant side in Ireland where they're fighting, if they go, you know what, I've got real life issues at home. We're dealing with mental illness. I've got some marriage problems. I got some financial problems. I got some things like this. All of a sudden you go, man, we are actually on the exact same page.
Yes.
And it's only this much that divides us. But I think that the big answer is this, is we just have to remember, man, that we live in a different kingdom, in a different realm. And it's above. It's the realm of Jesus and his kingdom. And all of these other parties, we were talking about governments a little bit ago.
Yeah.
All of those things are under his control and under his domain. And so we just have to, we just have to know Jesus. I mean, I know it sounds simple. We just have to know him. We have to know his word. And so we begin to think like him, act like him, speak like him, and then we're going to have a really clear road forward. So
I love how you frame that, because I think when you think about kids, I think it's kids and students, I guess, alike. Sometimes it can be overthought as far as what do I do next?
Yeah.
But you're saying if we think practically, just go back to the basic needs of your own household, if you will.
That's it.
what needs to happen. Like the idea of marriage, like we're all not going to always get along.
Yep.
Which is real, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, I'm like you're going to sit and listen to your wife. You're going to sit and have a conversation because this is what's going to move us forward.
That's right.
And I think in the student world, you're saying the same thing. If we can sit and listen to one another,
That's it, man.
right? Regardless of where we're at, maybe this can move the conversation forward,
Right.
and we all won't be so much.
And it's like Jesus, he said, I think Paul said it, but so we need to put the interests of others in front of our own. Yeah. And that takes time, it takes maturity. It's not easy, it's very hard, but it takes sacrifice, but that's the Jesus way. We die to our own self in order to listen to other people, and then there's an invitation to come right in and meet them. So yeah.
So if you would I guess as we finish up here, if you were to think about the needs right now, again, you're a dad, you've done student ministry before.
Yep.
What do students need that you have seen right here, right now?
Yeah, man. Yeah, so I mean, again, and then this fits into my home like really good. So because my kids have grown up in ministry and the church, they've seen it all. They've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, the real, all that kind of stuff. And so we're very mindful of that. But here's the deal at the end of the day. Because just so if you are listening, the church isn't perfect, all right? You guys probably know that, right? and the leaders of the churches aren't perfect. We're all in that same boat, man. We're all, all walking with Jesus, trying to become more like him. So, but here's what I want for my kids. They get church. How am I trying to say this? Here's what we pray for our kids. Outside of the church, do they know Jesus? Because that's a big deal. And a lot of times the church is set up as that front door to begin to encounter Jesus. But like when I read my Bible, like I read, especially it's from Genesis to Revelation, God is real and interacting in people's lives. He was never meant to be distant or just like understood by words on a piece of page, on a page, like I'm talking about the Bible.
Yes.
That our God is incarnated, and even as we're saying, his very spirit is living inside of us. That seems like a hard thing to grasp, but if we get the reality of that truth, the power of God living in us and that opportunity, so what I mean by that is like, when my kids experience God in a very tangible way, or they experience his power in a supernatural way, which is the way of Jesus, like if we're not experiencing that, we're missing what it means. God is supernatural in his nature, right? And so if we're not having a supernatural interaction with God on a regular basis, then we're missing the point. But here's my point. The enemy always tries to overplay his hand.
Every time.
Why is there so much interest in so many spiritual things right now? Witchcraft, I mean, there's all this like weird horror stuff, new age stuff, but everybody's into spiritualism. And into getting connected on a different level, mindfulness, all this kind of stuff. And people are looking for spiritual health, and they're looking for all of these other things, and they're not looking towards the church. But I would say, but they're not looking at Jesus. But Jesus is the place where we find our spiritual life, our spiritual well-being.
Yep.
And when we find him there, man, this is what I'm saying about my kids, and I think kids in general. I think there's an opportunity for us to press into who Jesus is. And man, I mean, I could talk forever, but we've seen him move in powerful supernatural ways where, youth there are, they're getting touched. We see people being physically healed in a moment. We see people having encounters with Jesus, hearing his voice, and all of these kinds of things. And I think we're going to see more and more of that if we press into it and believe it, because the shepherds are always speaking.
Yep.
We'll know his voice. And the book of Acts is full, and the New Testament is full of God's powerful kingdom on display. And so I think the more that the supernatural power of God is on display in our lives, we're going to see students flock towards Jesus, because they're going to realize there's something more than feeling good, the practical touch, taste, smell, kind of life that we live in, the comforts of their life. Because at the end of the day, everybody's looking for something that satisfies deep within. And Jesus is going, I'm right here. And I believe we're in an era again where God's starting to show himself as I am real, I am interactive, and I'm right here with you. And so, man, if there's anything, I would say press into Jesus, press into the secret place with him, and you will hear his voice. And don't be afraid to go out there and walk in faith, because, man, we're starting to see God do some pretty phenomenal things. So, yeah.
Well, usually I will come back and wrap it up.
Yep.
That was like, you got it. Like that was, Well said. I can shut my mouth. I can just do my thing. So honestly, thank you for your insight. I thank you for your wisdom and sharing over these last few moments. I know you could get a lot of stuff that's going on over these next couple weeks.
Awesome, man.
So it just means the world just to hear. Again, we've known each other for all of an hour, but it's been good just to chat and wrap a little bit. So thank you again.
Yep.
That's it for I don't know if it's this week, but you get my point. This is Aaron. I'm Jeff. Thanks guys for joining us.